Welcome to Island Baptist Church. Pastor Greg Judd's lesson today is in James chapter 2, entitled Faith Works.
I wonder if you've heard about that that latest and greatest product that's out there. You've heard about it, right? It's that one thing that you need that you didn't know you needed, that you had to have, and now you have to have it because you've heard about it. And it's a great thing. It does exactly what you need it to do, right? And before you found out about it, you probably didn't even know that you needed to do that thing, but now you found out about it and you need it. And they advertise it to you and they push it to you, and it looks great and it feels great. And then you remember the last product that they pushed to you, and they said, this is the thing you need. You got to have it. You need it right now. It's going to make your life more full. And then they push it to you, and you tried it, and it didn't quite fulfill you, right? You know the product I'm talking about? Well, the latest one that came across my desk, just as a matter of fact, yesterday, was the new Russian fat melting secret. It melts like 27 pounds of fat in like a week or something. I don't know. It was like 10 days. And it was something they tried to make me think that I really needed it. And to add to it, they added mystery to it. They said the Russians are trying to keep Americans from finding this because they want us to be fat and unhealthy, and it's part of their strategy. And the Russians are very soon going to take this off of all websites because they have great hackers. And so you better buy it now, right? You've been pitched to all your life. Things are being sold to you, and some things are good, and then sometimes you find something you really do like, and you go to a online shopping service, perhaps Amazon or someplace like that, and you say, now I want to find the best price, and I want to find out different varieties of it, and I want to choose. Americans have more choice now than ever. And unfortunately, the same is true with the gospel that's being pushed. There are versions of the gospel that are being pushed that perhaps are too good to be true. And last week we explored the thief on the cross and his process, that all it took for him to get to heaven was to believe on Jesus Christ, to truly believe that Jesus was who he said he was. The thief said, remember me when you come to your kingdom. And Jesus said, today you'll be with me in paradise. It was his true faith that made him whole and got him saved and took him to heaven on that very day. But unfortunately, we're being pushed different varieties of the gospel. If we want to know what the gospel is, the true good news, the true way to get to heaven, we need to look at the words of Jesus, all of the New Testament, and put it together and say, this is what it is. It's a package deal. You can't pick and choose. It's not Build-A-Bear gospel. You ever been to a Build-A-Bear? Anybody ever built a bear at Build-A-Bear? That's old stuff. I don't know. Maybe a few heads are not going up and down. But you get to pick and choose all sorts of different stuff. The gospel is not that way. Jesus still has a gospel today where he says, deny yourself, take up your cross daily. He says, whoever wants to be great must serve others. And Jesus told his disciples, you want to come follow me? I don't have a place to lay my head. There's no guarantees of riches and happiness and all this stuff. But if you follow me, if you believe I'm who I say I am, then you follow me. Well, there's several different brands of the gospel that are out there, and all variations in between. But there's one that Paul spent a lot of time on. He's saying, don't think you can work your way into heaven. Don't think you can work your way into heaven. It's all faith in Jesus Christ. It's not being good enough. It's not following the law. It's not letting your good outweigh your bad, like that could ever happen. But it's about believing in Jesus. So there's, on the far end of one scale, there's the works way. Well, I think I'm going to work. I'm going to be good enough. And some churches push that. If you attend so many times, if you give so much money, if you do so many things, and you have to be involved, and churches can get into that routine of purposefully, or maybe not on purpose, pushing people to saying you have to work to gain your salvation. It's just simply not scriptural. Simply not scripture. But then, on the other end of the spectrum, there's this sales pitch that says all you have to do is believe in Jesus. And didn't I just say that was a good thing? Yeah, but it's believed that Jesus is who he said he was. And we have some of this, what I call easy believism, where it's like, how many of you all want to go to heaven? Raise your hand, And then everybody raise their hands, we go, then just say, I believe. And then you say, I believe, and then, everybody's going to heaven, right? Because they just raise their hand. Or you bring them to an emotional moment, or somebody's at the lowest point of their life and they turn to God and say, God, please forgive me. That may or may not be a salvation moment. Sometimes you just feel bad and you want to get something off your chest. So there's this emotional side, this easy believism that all you got to do is everybody say, I believe, and then you're in. And the scriptures don't teach that either. Somewhere in the middle is what the true gospel is. It's more than working your way in. It's more than having an emotional moment. It is what we're going to find out here, that faith works. It works on you, and then you work it out. We're going to be in the book of James chapter 2. James chapter 2. And we're going to look at the idea of faith that works. James chapter 2, we're going to begin reading in verse 14. I'll give you a moment to get there. Those of you who have real Bibles. Well, your electronic Bible is real too, but physical paper Bibles. James asks two questions here, beginning in verse 14, James 2:14. He asks two good questions, and we're going to spend the time letting him and Jesus answer these two questions. What good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such a faith save him? Two good questions. First of all, what good is that kind of faith? And number two, can that faith really save him? I want to point your attention to the word in the middle of the screen, and it's the word claims, second line there. If a man claims to have faith. James is aware that this is one of those, I'm claiming this, I'm claiming to have faith, but does he have really faith? Does he really have faith? Paul spent time making sure in much of his writing to say, you can't work your way to heaven. You can't work your way to heaven. And he's prodding people who take pride in themselves to say, I'm going to get to heaven because I'm a pretty good guy. And he's saying, no, it doesn't work that way. James, on the other hand, is saying to people who say they believe, if you say you believe, you need to put your money where your mouth is. It needs to make a change in your life. It can't just be something that you claim happened. And so then he goes on to explore these two questions here. He brings up a hypothetical next in verse 15. And he says, just suppose, let's imagine this happening, everyday occurrence. Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed, but you don't do anything about his physical needs, what good is that? It's no good to that guy, right? That guy says, hey, I'm in need. I'm really hungry. I really, really need something. And we just go, oh, well, good luck with that. It's a hypothetical, but it's a real-life situation. We see people in need, and are we moving about that? But then he moves from there to an argument about that faith that people claim they have. If you claim to have this kind of faith, then he says, in the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. I don't know about you, but when you go to hang out with people, usually you want to hang out with people who are not dead. If you're going to buy a pet, you usually want a pet that's not dead. If you go to a place because you want some happening action, some good music, you don't want to go to a place that's dead, right? Dead is not good. And here he's saying that this kind of faith, that brand of faith, that easy believism faith, it's dead. It's not even alive. And then he goes on to break it down. But someone will say, you have faith and I have deeds. Here we got the spectrum here. I have faith, but you got those deeds. And then he says, show me your faith without your deeds. How are you going to do that? It's just this warm, fuzzy feeling I have about God. You're not going to be able to show that. And James is saying, show me that faith, and I'll show you my faith by what I do. Even the demons, well, you believe there's one God, good. Even the demons believe that. and they shudder. At least they have a response, right? They believe, and they're like, oh man, what's coming is going to be bad. And yet here, we find this faith is very, very dead. It has results that are unseeable, unsustainable, and unmeasurable. Kind of like the products we buy sometimes. Buy these pills, and they're going to do this great wonder for your body. Now, it's going to take 90 days, 120 days, but just keep taking them and keep paying us. And then you go and you're waiting for results. You're waiting for results, and you get no results. You go, that wasn't the real deal. James is saying the same thing. He's saying that faith without works is dead, much the same way that love without action is dead. You tell somebody you love them, man, Mom, I really love you. And then you don't call, you don't write, you don't text. You don't send a Mother's Day card. You don't do anything. But I really love you. She doesn't feel that love. In my wedding ceremonies, I usually talk to the groom mostly, but I say something to this effect. That, if you love your wife, you're sitting here thinking you're driving home from work, and you're thinking, oh, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. She's so beautiful. She's so wonderful. And you get all this good, warm feeling. How much of that does the other person feel? None, because they aren't there, they don't know. But when you come home, if you start talking to them and tell them what you felt, you start telling them what you're thinking, you start picking up your socks and doing stuff, that's when they start to feel that love. And so the love is proved by the actions. Love is a verb, and faith is also a verb. It's not a passive thing. It's something you do. I so believe in Jesus. Jesus is who He says He is, and therefore it moves me on the inside because I'm so changed in the heart that it moves and changes my behaviors. So this love without works is dead, and in, of course, what James is saying, faith without works is dead. And so where did the idea of works come in here? It just lets you know that, as a pastor of this church, I'm not saying this so that we're having a work day. And we need you all to come, and that's really, I'm just trying to preach at you and make you feel guilty. It's not about that at all. We're not trying to get you to do anything for the benefit of the church or the pastors. It's for your benefit to examine what the Scriptures say and say, how does this apply to me? Where am I in my faith, and examine my faith? What brand of faith am I sporting today? In the book of Ephesians, we understand about works that we were created for these works. We are God's workmanship. We're created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. It's not a second thought with God. It's like, well, now that they're saved, I guess I got to find something for them to do. No, it's like we were created to do good works. And let me tell you what your good works are. I don't really know. I wish I could. But if you study the Scriptures and you keep Jesus at the center of your life, you will find out what your good works are, who you're supposed to serve, how you're supposed to love, how you're supposed to put that gospel that changed your heart into changing other people's lives. We're created from the beginning. And if not, if we aren't in the business of changing lives, then really what we have here at the church is just a book club. We're just kind of like, well, we all kind of like the same book. Let's all read it, And it'd be like, getting a book on any subject. I'm trying to think. I had a subject this morning and it wasn't a good one. Any subject book, and you say we're gonna learn about how to cook, and so we sit around. We have a book club about how to cook, but none of us cook. We just like to talk about cooking. We're cooking experts because we read the book and we come and we discuss cooking. It's like, no, that's not what we're about. We're about good works that shine the light in the community for the purpose of pointing to Jesus, pointing back to Jesus. If it doesn't point back to Jesus, it's not gospel ministry work. It's just being nice. And the world can be nice, but the world can't impact people with the gospel as we can. So we are more than a book club. We are sending out people doing good deeds, doing our best to try to disciple people into living lights that shine a light to a dark world. And when difficult times come, they see us, and they know that we've helped, and they know what we believe, and we have opportunity to share further with the gospel. We go back to James. We continue on. James continues his explanation and answering those two questions. You foolish man, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our ancestor Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You remember the story there? Do you remember that story? Abraham waited a long time to have his son Isaac. He finally got his son. He was very excited about that. And then in short order, God said, I want you to sacrifice, kill your own son on this altar as an offering to me. So the story goes, what happened? He did exactly that. He gathered up the wood. He went up there and he was ready to sacrifice his son. He had the knife drawn to follow God's direction, and God stopped his hand and said, no, I just wanted you to be faithful, to be willing to do what I ask. And God provided a ram that was the offering that took the place of his son. So what do we find out from Abraham about this dead faith stuff? Abraham didn't just have a good story. Okay, God, I'm having a good prayer time, having a good quiet time. Oh, and you want me to do what? Sacrifice my son? Oh, that's a great idea, God. I'm in your book club. That's good. All right. And he just go on with his life and just like ignore what God said. Have you ever done that? Ever done that? God speaking to you about one thing and you going, that's nice, God. But I'm just going to keep doing this because that one thing, it's okay. Teach me something else. Bless me another way. And God's saying, man, you need to fix this one thing. This is the one thing I need you to do. And you're disobedient and you find your whole walk with Christ gets derailed. It doesn't mean you get unsaved. It doesn't mean you're going to hell. It just means you get off track until you come back and you get that thing fixed up. Well, Abraham didn't do that. He jumped right on. He said, God, this is what you have. I'm with it. I believe you're who you say you are, and therefore I'm going to do what you call me to do. And you see that his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scriptures say, it was fulfilled that says Abraham believed God, it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend. You see that a person is justified by what he does and not by his faith alone. The thief on the cross never had opportunity other than sharing with the other thief. He had no opportunity for good works, but his heart was so changed he already began to do that. His works never saved him. Your works will never save you. But if you have a true salvation, you're going to see those works come out. And we don't have time for the next story, but it's in our passage, so we're going to read through it quickly. Verse 25, in the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? You can look up that story, but the same way she believed in God's people and God's plan, and she put that into action. A true faith always gets put into action. And true belief changes everything about everything. If Jesus is who he said he is, if eternity is what he says it is, if he's in control and he's the boss of everything, it changes every aspect of our lives. That change may take place over time, and I'm certain that it does. God's in the work of changing you. It doesn't mean the second you get saved that you're immediately changed, but the change on the inside takes place. And as he changes your heart and your attitude, he's going to change your behaviors. Not only the things you do as far as right and wrong, but the way you serve other people. Jesus himself said that investing in him or believing in him is an investment. It's an investment. You're storing up treasures in heaven when we act in faith and we obey. He counts those as investments in heaven. In heaven, Jesus says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold it. He sold everything he had, and he bought it. Now, the man in his story, he had one job, and that was to find good pearls. All right? He was a pearl finder. That's what he did. And so, when he found a pearl that was worth something and going to turn a big profit, he bought that pearl. And in this story, it was expensive pearl, but he knew it was worth more in the marketplace than they was going to pay for it. So he went and sold everything he had, and he said, "This is the pearl of great price and its value, and I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to purchase it." Kingdom of heaven is just like that. We give up all that we are, all that we thought we wanted for what God wants, and we find that it's better, and it's more valuable, and it turns a great profit. I know you probably remember the movie Back to the Future with the time travelers. I like the idea of time travel. It's a pretty cool thing. But imagine, if you would, that a time traveler came back to you today, and he said, Have you seen what the market values are doing in housing here on South Padre Island? And by the way, have anybody else seen what's happening there? I mean, they're just going up and up. We have a realtor here that knows what's going on, right? But it'd be nice to have a time traveler who just been, dialed in like 4 years from now and said, man, in 2025, the average home price is going to be here. And you're going, man, that's a sure thing, because I believe this time traveler. What would you do? You would do like the pearl finder would do. You would say, man, I don't have enough money to buy many properties or maybe even one, but you'd be finding out a way to do it if you knew you were going to triple your money. I mean, if it was a sure thing, you would be saying, okay, I got to go to the bank. I got to get some people together. We're going to work this thing because it's worth it. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is worth it. You invest all you have in Him. You invest all you have in other people. And He says the blessings are going to come not only here, but on the other side. True belief, again, changes everything. And we have to do what Jesus said. All through the Scripture, we find that people, most of them said yes to Jesus. He told His disciples, He said, cast your net on the other side. They did it. Somebody had a withered hand, and they said, reach forth your hand. And they did. They followed what He said. Take up your bed and walk. Go wash yourself in the river Jordan, and your sight will be revealed. And God gives us instruction, and the people who believed in Him did what He said. And perhaps God's nudging at you to say there's some things you need to do. I don't know what they are. Maybe you need to befriend somebody that maybe you don't like that much for the gospel purpose, for the reason of sharing Jesus with them. Maybe there's some other causes you need to give your time and effort and maybe even some money to. I don't know. But when you walk with God, you need to hear His voice and say yes, yes, yes. Jesus goes on in a different passage in Matthew 7, speaking about this same subject. He says, by their fruit you will recognize them. And notice, just a little side note, He doesn't say, by their fruit you can judge them. It's not your job to judge people and say, oh, they're not, I bet they're not even saved. I don't even know. It's not your job to do this. Saying, by your fruit you'll recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. And people who claim, oh, this kind of salvation, this easy salvation, I just believe and that thing is good, and they have no change in their lives. They don't bear any fruit at all. Jesus is making a pointed statement about this. And then He goes on to even be made perhaps a little harsher and a little more scary in my mind. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. Jesus gets pretty much down to the point, doesn't He? He says, I'm working in you as a believer, and you are to produce good fruit. And I'm not pretending to say that, everywhere you go, people are going to get saved by the dozens or by the hundreds. I've never known anybody who had the gift where that happened like it did in disciples' time. But I know people who invest in other people, and they give their very best. And sometimes it takes days, and most of the time it takes weeks or years before people come to know Christ with us investing. And I don't know why that works that way. All I know is that we need to be faithful, that we are investing, and we are putting the work in. So we get to the answers here to the questions. They're here and there are other places, but can that kind of faith do you any good? Well, this is what's going to happen. The kind of faith that you just say, oh, I believe, and you never put Christ into your life, you never incorporate your life around Him, you never begin to change, the Scriptures say no. So you'll be left out. And will it save you? No. The answer is no and no. And of course, you knew that from the beginning, and probably James asked these questions somewhat rhetorically. But then he goes on to answer them. And then Jesus says, probably, well, I don't know, these are some of the scariest verses for me. And they really should cause you and me both to be introspective about our faith and what we're doing for the Lord. First about your faith, and then about what you're actually doing. But Jesus says this, and this is following that same diatribe he just talked about in how trees got to bear good fruit. He says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, not everyone who uses those words, you're the boss, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. So he's saying this very same thing. He's saying, you call me Lord, but you don't do what I say. What's the deal? What's the deal? There's got to be a change. And it's a lifetime change. It's not come to the altar. Maybe it is. Maybe you get one thing right today. You come to the altar or kneel and bow on the altar of your heart and you get something right with God. And that's the next step on the journey, to always say yes to Him. In Matthew, in the verse that follows, he says something that's perhaps even more troubling. I don't know. It's troubling and comforting at the same time. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles? And I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. So the people who thought they're going to work their way into heaven, Jesus said, it doesn't work that way. People who say, I prayed a simple prayer and just wanted to go to heaven, and so I did it, but I didn't really turn my life over to Christ. Said they're not going to make it either. Now that's not I want to make sure that you understand this, that I'm not trying to invalidate your salvation experience. I know at least one person who, the youngest person I know that prayed to receive Christ was 4 years old. And a simple prayer of a child that really understands who Christ is and I need Him is all it takes. But it's real and from the heart. And so I'm not playing off whatever might be your salvation experience, because if you believe, it's going to produce fruit if it's a real belief. But if not, we need to examine ourselves. In conclusion, James concludes in verse 26. He says, the body without the spirit is dead, and so faith without deeds is dead. A body that's not breathing is not alive, and a faith that's not working, and I don't know what that looks like for you, but it's not doing things for the Lord out of grateful heart, is not a true faith. As a matter of fact, it's not even faith by definition. It's a claimed faith, because real faith is going to produce a change in the heart and change in the life. So our job as believers is to revive the dead with the good news. They don't know they need the gospel. We just preach Jesus. We tell them about the good news. It's up to God to convict them. We share the good news. And our job is to prod those who believe or who say they believe to good works. Examine your faith and get back to good works. We need to plan our lives around pleasing God. And it becomes a fulfilled life as you walk with God. You know the joy of giving, you know the joy of serving, and you know the joy of becoming like Him. So my challenge for you and for me is to do just this. I want you to evaluate your faith. Go back. When did you believe? Examine that relationship with Christ. Did it change your heart? Is it producing? And then examine your behaviors, because they go together. Faith without works doesn't do much, but faith that moves you into God's plan is the best thing for you and for Him. Would you take a minute, bow your heads with me and pray? God, we thank You for Your word. And I thank You for the challenge that it brings to me and it brings to everyone who hears it. God, it's convicting, it's cutting, it's moving. And God, we don't want to go through any motions just to go through them, but we do want to honor You. So we pray that You'll help us to examine our hearts the way we need to this morning. Lord, to find where we are in our relationship with you. And God, perhaps there's someone here that doesn't know you at all. I pray that you'll turn their heart toward you, that they will be able to say yes, that they believe you are the true Son of God. And Lord, for the rest of us who are believers, I pray that you'll challenge us in our faith, in our works, and we ask that you'll guide us in those things. I ask and pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks for visiting. Find us at www.islandbaptistchurch.org.